My fellow amateurs, first and foremost, take care of yourselves. During this pandemic, especially for our older and immunocompromised people, now is the time to take precautions to avoid the spread of COVID-19. And I'm looking at the amateur radio population especially. Take care of yourself, wash your hands frequently, keep a distance from other people, avoid shopping during peak hours, stay home, and heed the warnings from the CDC and other local governments, especially regarding like shelters in place and lockdowns and that sort of thing. The only way to get through this whole epidemic, this pandemic, is by extending the duration of the disease so as to not overwhelm our medical system while remedies and vaccines are being worked on, being tested. If we didn't take these measures, the medical system, the healthcare system would come to a screeching halt. Many people will get sick and die, and that's not good. But I'm sure you're tired of the constant headlines on coronavirus, and you're very aware of the things, the current events going on. So the thing I really have to say is this, and it's not a call for radio volunteers to save us from the disease, as some might expect. It's ham radio, so is everything failing? No. Communications hasn't fallen. In fact, the internet is generally doing really well. A report from Cloudflare is saying that they've only seen about a 5% to 10% increase, depending on the country. I think some countries have had about 40% increases in total internet traffic, and ISPs, and except for Charter, web hosts like Amazon, Cloudflare, etc., have had no problem adjusting to the load. Now, that's not to say that sites like Discord and Zoom and other multimedia companies where they're doing streaming and stuff is undergoing some trouble. But I've been in WebEx and Zoom all day, and it seems to be holding up really well. And numerous people around the country are working from home and doing school from home, so that's good to hear at least. I just wanted to inform and discuss the continuity of amateur radio business, if you will, and kind of make a plea to the amateur radio community to keep things moving. So I've been monitoring VEs from all over the country, and I've found that most, if not all, VE testing sessions, and these are the sessions where you take amateur radio exams, they're canceled nationwide because they are all in person, and that's kind of the status quo of performing amateur radio exams. Is you go to a testing session, you have 3 volunteer examiners there, they proctor and make sure that you're following instructions, and then they grade it and they test it and all that stuff. So I'm just gonna block people who are being annoying. So there is one exception to that with all these cancellations. There is the Anchorage Volunteer Examination Committee, VEC. They're the only VEC, as far as I know, in the entire FCC jurisdiction that performs remote testing. And I thought this is a really good opportunity to keep testing coming along because, people are going to need things like hobbies. Not necessarily, they're not going to need to be using amateur radio for prepping or anything for this particular disease, but it would represent somewhat of a shock to amateur radio if we didn't have any testing going on whatsoever. And it is 2020, it's the 21st century, and you would imagine that by this point we would have been able to figure out how to do online, remote VE sessions. And that's what Anchorage VEC has done, but there's a caveat to that. The only reason why they do remote VE sessions is to support those with hardship who live way out in the boonies, who are miles and miles away from a testing session. The candidate, the amateur radio license candidate, or the test taker, and the VEC has to make as many amends to reasonable accommodation, to reasonably accommodate the test taker. And if it cannot be met, then they will do a remote session. And the process, I'm not sure of the process too well because I haven't been involved, but it's not very convoluted, but it's made to ensure the responsibility of the VEC to perform the test responsibly and accurately, and to ensure the test taker is not cheating. There's software involved. There's webcams involved. It seems like there's also there's still a person that actually has to show up in person. But it is pretty complicated, and the Anchorage VEC was not expecting to have basically the load of the entire nation's VE testing all at once. So it's kind of crazy. And they are not anticipating on, doing all of the VE testing for the entire nation. They are still doing remote examinations. Let me turn down my mic here and open up a browser and show you guys. They have updated their website, and the issue is that they are going to accept remote testing applicants to apply, but you might have a 60-day waiting period, which is, somewhat long for people who are expecting to get their amateur radio exam. I don't know what kind of capacity they have to actually test. Before, it was like 1 to 2. Like a week, and now it's gone up exponentially. So this is kind of my point. I don't want you guys to go to Anchorage VEC and say, hey, I'm signing up as a VE, which you can do and get accredited, because they're trying to figure out what to do right now. What I want other amateur radio operators out there to do is to call up their local VEC, whether it's W5YI or the ARRL, and tell them that this would be a great opportunity for expanding the abilities and capabilities of remote testing. A lot of hams, all the hams out there, if you look at certain forums online, believe that remote testing will reduce the effectiveness of the exam. It will get people who are not worthy of an amateur radio license in there, but my argument to that is it's, schools, finals, college courses, numerous testing is all online. Like, I can go get a boater's license. I can become a notary public. I could apply for a myriad of certifications and licenses, but not an amateur radio license. For that, I require a 3-person VE team to make sure that I'm looking at my paper, not cheating and whatnot. There is software that does that for you. There's webcams, there's the internet. It just makes sense. So that's what I'm kind of getting at. Sorry to disappoint anybody who thought I had some groundbreaking, exciting news or groundbreaking, heartbreaking news. I just have a plea for amateurs to look forward into the future and not necessarily use coronavirus as a reason for doing remote testing, but just thinking about how in the future this should be a thing to express a lower barrier of entry to new hams coming down the pipeline. A lot of hams are turned off and turned away at the fact that they have to drive somewhere, meet 3 random people. They have anxiety, they have that barrier. This doing more remote testing or even totally online testing would probably improve compliance. It would drastically skyrocket license numbers and thereby activity, not in a proportional, probably not in a totally proportional 1-to-1 way, but more hams is not a bad thing. And any kind of spectrum issues you might deal with people who don't know what they're doing, I feel is unfounded, because amateurs are self-policing, first of all, and second of all, if somebody is seeking an amateur radio license, you should give them the benefit of the doubt that they have been doing their research. And after all, there's still going to be examinations for this. I'm not saying to completely remove amateur radio testing. I think that is very important to make sure that the community falls within the mission and scope and guidelines and strategy of the amateur radio service. I'm just saying this testing can be done online. So that's my rant about that. The second rant I have is Hamvention is canceled. Everyone knows that already, right? So what I suggested here is to bring Hamvention on the to the internet, and probably not just Hamvention, but in general. I propose to like have the presenters and vendors and lightning round talkers and contest university and everything, put it online in some way, shape, or form, so that the people who not necessarily paid for it, but just hams in general, can enjoy a virtual meeting place and a virtual community of hamventioners online, where we can talk to Q&A with these people who were originally doing not license, I'm thinking about the wrong thing, who are going to do forums and talks and speeches and stuff that really invigorates the amateur radio community. Even if it wasn't live streamed, recording these things and posting them online, and having, like, say, Dara collate all of the talks into one place, so you can run like a playlist and have the whole week or weekend to review. But I really stress the idea of putting it live, like have an actual schedule with the actual presenters to come on to YouTube or Twitch just like I am, and have chat just like this over here, of people talking and asking questions to the presenter, so that we don't lose that kind of, it's not economic, but we don't lose that that social, what would you call it, dynamite in amateur radio. Because to me, every time I go to Hamvention, I am invigorated. Like, I love meeting the people, seeing the people, but I also love listening to all these wonderful talks and wonderful explanations and these novel ideas and unique, like, situations and stories. And we don't have to get rid of that. You still have the whole World Wide Web. I haven't done anything personally but write a blog about it, and I haven't contacted the Hamvention crew, because I know they're dealing with a lot of stress. But if you're a Hamvention organizer, a forum presenter, a vendor, even an attendee, I want you guys to think about this, and we can get together and start bringing some of these things online. Not to make any money or anything. It's just like, why am I doing the CW stream? Because it's fun and people seem to enjoy it. And seem to be enjoying learning CW. I think people would really enjoy seeing this stuff online. And even a lot of people were like, well, this is the perfect opportunity to put it on the air. And I'm like, well, actually, yeah, because if they're on the internet, they can be streamed. Like, they're technically they could literally be broadcasted, since it's basically a bulletin of amateur radio. Or you could consider it a two-way conversation between the presenter who's online and people who are on the repeater. There might need to be some kind of host or somebody on the repeater listening and watching the chat and adding questions and whatnot. But live streaming or simulcasting the presentations over repeaters, Hecklink, and even HF stations would be pretty awesome, I think. So for the 6-7 people who are watching this, thank you for letting me get up on a soapbox and yell out to the amateur radio world to plea for some cool new things in the amateur radio world. I hope this message gets spread around, and if you guys have any questions on remote testing with the Anchorage VEC or in general, or with putting Hamvention online, I won't even mention amateur radio contesting, because that's kind of like off my plate at the moment. I had this whole thing on the CQ contest reflector about live streaming, and it was very interesting to see the opinions of how people believe live streaming is or may not be cheating in contesting. So yeah, that's about it. So with that, everyone can just shoo off, and I'm gonna go learn some Morse code. I don't have like the gumption inside me to go learn Morse code right now, so I'm gonna address the chat a little bit. Hi, Aaron, good to see you. Sorry that you're self-quarantined. Mobile data has been seeing outages. I haven't seen anything about that, but I wouldn't be surprised, because a lot of mobile companies have been allowing freeing up their bandwidth and stuff, especially for people who don't have a home bandwidth or home broadband connection. Hello, Canada. Colleges could figure it out. Colleges already do remote testing. They do distance learning. And I mean, if it's good enough to get you a college degree, I think it ought to be good enough to get you a federal FCC license, but that's just me. I am naive, of course. I think that there's a lot of ground to be made on this whole thing. I mean, if you go back to 2014 is when the report in order 1474, I'm starting to get it memorized. This defined the rule changes to make testing remote, right? And in fact, it's right here in page 7, remote testing. It gives the VECs like the ability and the responsibility to administer test sessions, but the FCC doesn't make any rules, so it's a ruling against it. It's up to the VEC to perform and ensure the testing is done appropriately. The test taker is supervised appropriately, and I think there's very simple ways using a webcam and test taking software to perform that goal completely remotely. However, there's just no VECs, and in fact, many VECs outright refuse to do this. Let me check Facebook. Did this while in Antarctica, it was doable. Yeah. But that's the point I got at earlier. Like, yeah, they tested people in Antarctica, they test people in the Arctic Circle, and that's because they have to do it remotely. But just because you have a VE session, say down the street, doesn't mean that you can't do remote testing. Like, there's nothing in here to me that I've found that says specifically, and I have to read it to make sure I'm not, shooting myself in the foot, that you have to have a test session near you, or you have to look for test sessions near you. It's the VECs that make up these rules, and arguably somebody could create a completely remote VEC that does only remote testing for people like on the fly. I've been talking about that to a lot of people, but you do have to be accredited, and you have to have written authorization from the FCC to perform testing. And it would be interesting to submit an application as a new VEC doing only remote testing and see what they say. But based on this, you could legitimately do that. One thing the Anchorage VEC team is good at is really fast turnaround. So once this pandemic is over and they're back to normal, they are trying to expand their reach throughout the entire contiguous 48, so that they can administer tests super quickly. Like they have turnarounds of hours instead of weeks. Like the ARRL VEC requires VECs teams to submit, or VE teams to submit their paperwork by mail in bulk, and then the ARRL does bulk batch, submission to the FCC, which is, when you actually talk to the FCC, that's a totally automated process. So what other VEs, teams like Laurel does this as well, and maybe a few others in Anchorage, they directly scan and submit the paperwork to the FCC, and within a few hours, he told me, Brandon, the Anchorage VEC chairman, told me he got a call sign in 6 minutes one day. And I'm like, whoa. And people have heard from the Laurel VEC, if you get your Hamvention, if you take your VE test at Hamvention, you can get a call sign the same day if you're a technician, because they submit that paperwork to the FCC right then and there. They process it automatically because they've checked all the boxes, the VEs did, and the VEC, submits it, and it's all good. So yeah, Aaron, we should. In less populated states where you have to drive hundreds of miles, it would be much better to have it remote. Now, I currently don't have any comments lambasting me about saying, oh, this is the me generation, you darn millennials, get off my lawn, yada, yada, yada. We had to go upstairs or uphill both ways in the rain, had to go to the FCC field office to take our license. I understand that, and I love hearing some of the stories. In fact, especially when you have these G-men coming up to your door, or you have to walk in and these guys in suits are just ominously looking at you as a kid. I've heard really cool stories, but that's simply the past, and we don't have field offices anymore. And now we have this really bureaucratic, antiquated process of an examination in person that is really hard to do remotely. In fact, like one of the reasons why it's so hard to do remotely is just to ensure like you're doing everything 100% correctly, and that the test taker isn't cheating or whatever. But I argue if a person's seeking an amateur radio license and they take a test, then they are doing their due diligence. It's not like, maybe a very, very small percentage of them are, malicious, but I mean, that's just like everything. You can't, I mean, there are amateur radio operators out there who have been, have their license revoked for spamming, and you have 7200, which arguably everyone there are licensed amateurs. They just won't say their call sign, or 14313, or on the Renegade repeater. There are places of there's hives of scum and villainy all over the amateur bands, and these are licensed hams. It's not like you open this up to the world and suddenly you get a million preppers who never get on the air. You suddenly get a billion, people all over the radio spectrum causing havoc. That just will not happen. I would love to see an argument against it, but it just doesn't make common sense that opening up licensing remotely suddenly opens the floodgates. It's just the same argument that they have against like technician enhancements, or not enhancements, the entry-level licensing, or basically any change to amateur radio is going to be the end of the world. And that's kind of my MO, is I'm trying to change amateur radio to not make it the end of the world for everyone out there, for the traditionalists and for the people who have been doing it for years, but for the next generation of hams who are looking for more interesting things, and that are far too busy to have to deal with the whole VE session scenario, but are willing enough to study and learn and actually still take an exam. I'm definitely all about examination. But I am also for a license class that doesn't require an examination, like a novice, like bring back novice, get people in, have it for 90 days and see how you like it, or something like that. But I digress from there. So yeah, Laurel is free as well, which is very cool. So that's my rant, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you for watching, and I will get back to you into our normally scheduled CW learning program, where I'm going to try to do some more kind of interactive stuff, and I don't know, do some more newsy things like this, and try to rile up some hams out there who are stuck at home to do some cool new things in ham radio. I have so many ideas about contesting. If you're a software engineer and you're bored, hit me up, because I have a lot of work for you. But that's about it. Remember to stay healthy, wash your hands, stay out of the public for too long. Well, you can definitely should go outside and go on a walk. Just no big gatherings, and don't touch, commonly touched surfaces outdoors, I guess, or in public areas. No toilet paper stocked here. We have just a regular amount of toilet paper and the normal amount of, food and water and stuff to survive, for at least a couple of weeks, if not more. Which is always a good thing to be. I listened to a very good podcast on reasonable preparation, not prepping, but preparation. I've always hated the word prepper because it's a negative connotation, but to be prepared is a good thing. To have a few weeks worth of food, even some water, non-perishables. Don't worry about toilet paper, because if it really hits the fan, then you have a bucket of water, or a rag, it's not hard. It's just the only reason why people hoarded toilet paper was because of media frenzies and all that stuff, but there's no supply chain difficulty. You hit me up on Googling N0SSE and finding me. Twitter works. n0ssc@.com. Sterling at n0ssc.com is my email. It can there also have a contact form on my website. So yeah. I think that's about it. And if you do the engineering of software, boy, do I have some some work for you. And yeah, walking the line between paranoid and prepared. It is a fine line. It's not bad to be a little not really paranoid. Maybe I should take that back. It is bad to be paranoid, but it is always good to have your eye out a few steps ahead. That's all I'm saying about that. All right, I'm done. 73, everyone. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and take it easy. Bye.